All right, so let's crank things up today as we dig into this review of Stress Test's first album.
Okay.
Now, I know hardcore punk may not be for everyone, but stick with us.
Right.
This deep dive is about figuring out how a band can make a genre that's been around for like over 40 years sound new again.
Yeah.
Our reviewer says it's a familiar but undeniably enjoyable take on thrash-infused hardcore.
Yeah.
So how do they do it?
Well, what's interesting is that they're not just like doing the same old thing.
Yeah.
The reviewer talks about how the album just keeps moving, calling it
Yeah.
unbreakable and memorable.
Right.
They're doing something really cool with pacing and energy, and that's what we're going to break down.
Okay, so before we get to the music, let's talk about the band.
Okay.
You might recognize some of these guys. The drummer and bassist are actually from Unto Others.
Oh, right. Yeah, the same rhythm section.
Yeah.
But the reviewer makes it clear that Stress Test is totally different.
Uh-huh.
It's not just some side project.
Yeah.
They're doing their own thing in hardcore.
And it's not just who's in the band that's different.
Right.
Brandon Hill, who plays bass in Unto Others, is on guitar and vocals here.
Oh, wow.
That's going to change things up.
Definitely. And speaking of changes, let's get into the sound.
Okay.
The reviewer describes it as a classic thrash attack with a dash of grind spirit.
So for those of us who don't know hardcore like that, what does that actually sound like?
Yeah, good question.
I mean, I'm picturing like a mosh pit with spilled beer and broken instruments, but I bet there's more to it than that.
Oh, yeah, you're definitely getting the energy right.
Okay.
Think like short bursts of music,
Yeah.
those driving drum beats. Hardcore is known for that D-beat sound.
Okay.
But Stress Test adds in those thrash metal influences, so you get this like powerful wall of sound.
Wow.
It's not just speed and aggression, it's musical too. But
Yes.
that's what sets them apart.
The reviewer actually mentions they're good in the studio, especially with how they use the bass,
Uh-huh.
which is interesting because isn't hardcore usually like raw and lo-fi?
You're right. A lot of bands go for that raw sound, but Stress Test seems to be doing both.
Yeah.
They've got that raw energy, but they clean it up a bit, especially that bass. It's punchy.
Interesting.
It's like they're taking those classic hardcore things and making them modern.
So they're not afraid to experiment with the production.
Yeah.
And speaking of influences, the reviewer name drops Napalm Death and Terror.
Oh, yeah.
What should we know about them to understand Stress Test?
Okay, so think of them as two sides of hardcore.
Okay.
Napalm Death are like legends for their grindcore, sound super fast, super aggressive.
Right.
Terror, on the other hand, is like that meat-headed aggro crossover, as the reviewer says.
Uh-huh.
Hardcore, but with a lot of metal in it.
Okay, so we've got raw intensity on one side and metal on the other. Are you
Right.
saying Stress Test is mixing those two?
Exactly. They're taking from both, but adding their own thing, too.
Ooh.
Remember what the reviewer said about the momentum and energy? That's where it gets good. They mentioned songs like Coward and Bastard Behavior, which have that Exodus stomp.
Exodus Stomp. Now you've got me curious.
Okay, so Exodus is this thrash metal band known for these super heavy chugging riffs.
Okay.
That's the stomp. And Stress Test uses that and mixes it with those D-beats we talked about.
Oh.
They even throw in some of that municipal waste party banger energy.
Municipal waste. Okay, now I'm picturing that mosh pit again, but with more fun.
Yeah, that's a pretty
Yeah.
good picture.
Huh?
Municipal Waste brings like this fun, over-the-top energy to hardcore.
Okay.
They're known for their crazy live shows and songs that are like anthems for partying hard.
So we've got thrash grind and party anthems all in one.
Yeah.
Stress Test sounds like a wild ride, but I bet there's more to it than just moshing.
Right.
What about the lyrics? What are they yelling about?
That's where you see that P-word attitude the reviewer mentions.
Okay.
They're talking about how hardcore has always been political, often with a really aggressive edge.
Yeah.
And Stress Test isn't afraid of that.
So it's not all just beer and broken instruments. There's
Yeah.
real anger and like social commentary in this music.
Absolutely. The reviewer points to the snarky samples and layered vocal assaults, as proof of how intense they are
Yeah.
and that they're willing to talk about serious stuff.
Yeah.
They're not just yelling to yell. There's a meaning behind it.
But here's the thing that gets me.
What's that?
The reviewer gave the album 3 out of 5.
Okay.
Good, but not amazing with all this energy and intensity. What's holding them back?
Well, the reviewer actually says that the album being so short might be the problem. It's under 20 minutes long, and they say Stress Test could have done more musically.
Okay.
Like they're holding back that they could push themselves further.
So more is always better. I mean, sometimes a short burst can be really effective, right?
Yeah.
It's like a punch to the gut, quick, powerful, and you remember it.
That's the debate, and the reviewer gives some examples.
Okay.
Songs like Degrees of Violence, It Isn't Real, and Gullible have more intricate guitar work.
Uh-huh.
It shows what Stress Test could do if they, like, stretch things out a bit.
And
They can clearly do complex stuff, but they seem hesitant to really go for it.
so the question is, would you rather have pure aggression, or would you want them to explore those more complex parts, even if it meant losing some of that raw energy?
Yeah, would you trade conciseness for experimentation?
Exactly. What do you think? Is there a risk they get too technical and lose that hardcore edge?
It's a tough balance. A lot of bands struggle with that.
Yeah.
How do you stay true to what the genre is about, but also do new things?
Right.
It's like walking a tightrope.
And maybe that's what the reviewer is getting at with that 3 out of 5.
Yeah, maybe.
It's not that the album is bad, it's that it feels like a band that's still figuring things out, you know?
Right.
Like they're still figuring out how to balance those two things.
Exactly. And the reviewer says they have a lot of potential.
Uh-huh.
They point out that Stress Test has all these influences to draw from, so they could go in a lot of different directions.
It's like they've built a good foundation, but they're still working on what goes on top of it.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
They have the skills and the talent. Now it's just figuring out how to use them to make something really unique.
Exactly. They're not just repeating the past.
Yeah.
They're building on it.
Right.
And that's what makes them so exciting. They're like a new generation of hardcore,
Yeah.
one that respects the history, but also wants to push things forward.
Speaking of pushing forward, let's talk about the big question.
Okay.
Can a band like Stress Test, with all their potential, ever be mainstream? Hardcore is like a small genre, you know?
Yeah.
And it's not exactly known for being radio-friendly.
You're right. Hardcore is all about that raw energy and intensity, even aggression.
Yeah.
It's not the kind of music you usually hear on the radio between pop songs.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine a Stress Test song being a hit next to, like, Taylor Swift.
True.
But then again, look at Rage Against the Machine.
Oh, yeah.
They brought political and aggressive music to a lot of people.
And they did it without changing who they were.
Exactly.
They stayed true to themselves, but also made music that people outside of hardcore liked.
So maybe there's hope for Stress Test.
Yeah.
Maybe they can be the ones to connect those two worlds, you know? To
Yeah.
show everyone that hardcore can be more than just noise and anger.
I think the key is finding that balance.
Yeah. Yeah.
Keeping that raw energy that makes hardcore,
Yeah.
but also making it so more people can enjoy it.
Right.
It's tough, but it's not impossible.
All right. Well, we've talked about a lot of stuff here, but at the end of the day, it's up to each listener to decide what they think of Stress Test's music.
That's true.
So to our listeners, we say this. Go give it a listen. See what you think.
Yeah.
You might be surprised. Maybe it'll even make you want to mosh safely, of course.
Right. And if you do find yourself like tapping your foot or
Yeah.
headbanging, let us know.
Yeah.
We always want to hear what you guys think, especially about bands that are like pushing the limits.
Speaking of limits, there's one last thing I've been thinking about.
Oh, yeah. What's that?
It's something that's been in my head as we've been talking about Stress Tests, and it's kind of a weird thing.
Okay. I like a good head scratcher. Lay it on me.
Okay, so we talked about how Stress Test has all this raw energy and intensity, right?
Uh-huh.
How they're coming from those classic hardcore bands.
Right.
But they're also like really good musicians, and their production is so clean. Could they actually be too good?
That's interesting because the reviewer kind of touches on that.
Yeah.
Remember how they talked about how good they are in the studio and that punchy bass?
Yeah, that stood out to me too, especially for hardcore. But how can being good at something be bad?
Well, think about it. Hardcore is usually like DIY,
Yeah.
rough around the edges.
Right.
It's about raw emotion,
Yeah.
pure aggression. Like the imperfections are a part of what makes it cool.
So by being too polished, too technical, are they losing some of that hardcore rawness?
It's something to think about for sure.
Yeah, is that what's stopping them from getting a perfect score?
Maybe it's a tough balance.
Right.
If we look at the bigger picture, think about other genres that went through the same thing.
Okay.
Like when punk got popular, some people said it lost its rebellious side.
Same with grunge.
So is there a chance Stress Test becomes too safe if they keep making their sound cleaner?
It's possible?
Could they lose the thing that makes them exciting in the first place?
It's a good question, and only time will tell, but it makes you think. What do you as a listener care about most in music?
Right.
Is it that raw energy and realness, even if it's not perfect?
Uh-huh.
Or do you like technical skill and polish, even if it means losing some of that power?
That's a great question to think about. It all goes back to what we talked about at the beginning.
Yeah.
How does a band make a genre that's over 40 years old sound new?
Right.
Maybe Stress Test has figured it out, or maybe they're still trying to figure it out just like us.
And that's what's so cool about it. Music is a journey for both the band and the people listening.
I like that.
So go explore, discover, and see where Stress Test takes you.
Yeah.
Who knows? Maybe they'll be huge or maybe they'll stay underground. Either way, they're a band to watch. Absolutely. Thanks for diving in with us today, everyone. And be sure to check out our next deep dive where we'll be, well, you'll have to tune in to find out.
Can't spoil the surprise.
Until then, keep those ears open and those minds curious.